The hour has come, people. So can we take our seats, please?
Cheers, wanting attention, guys.
Yeah. 9:30 has been and gone. As this is the last audit risk meeting, we can't afford to let the standards slip. Right, so I declare Audit Risk and Finance ARF 25/2 open. And remind you that it's live streamed and Zoom is available. We'll start with our karakia. Settle the spirit, clear the mind, prepare the body to achieve what needs to be achieved. Yes. And we have an apology for lateness from Deputy Mayor Scrimmager, who's stuck in traffic somewhere. So,
Isn't Tracy away as well?
Tracy Coxhead.
Tracy's on leave, isn't she? Yeah, so no, don't need an apology. So, move on a second for the, thank you, Councillor Ray, Councillor Henry, all those in favour? Against, carried. Thank you. There are no late items that I'm aware of. Oh, well, there's one that you got last night, but that'll be mentioned later in the meeting. Report. Any declarations of interest that we need to take note of? No. No public excluded items, no public forum. So we'll move on to the reports at page 7. Oh, so, all right. So,
Yeah, he's online. Yeah, okay. So if we just
Okay.
move and see that.
so we'll move to change the order. We'll go to 10.2. We have our auditor online at the moment, so we'll take advantage of that. So do I need to move in a second to change the order? Thank you, Councillor Murray-Benj, Councillor Sol, all those in favour? Aye. Against, carried. All right, so we're on to 10.2 on page 25. And Jonathan's going to lead us into that one.
Good morning, everybody. Through you, Mr. Chair, just introducing the audit management report. So this is a report that Audit New Zealand does every year in conjunction with our financial year audit. So this is to do with the year end 30 June 2024. So the published audit report was an unmodified audit report that was issued on the 18th of February. But this report that's been presented today includes further recommendations for improvement for Council. These recommendations were all classified as either necessary or beneficial. The necessary ones are typically recommended to be completed within a 6-month period, and the beneficial ones within a 12-month period. There were none noted for urgent or immediate action. The report highlights 10 new items, 16 closed items which have been remedied and closed off with the auditors, and 13 remaining open items. All items and timeframes then get moved to the outstanding recommendations register to ensure that we keep track of these. Happy to take any questions, and for Anton to also chip in, who's joined us online as well. Welcome, Anton.
Councillor Murray-Benj.
It refers on page 28 that the audit did not go smoothly as anticipated. Could you elaborate on that, please? And with the extra work, how much more did that cost us?
I'll chip in first, but Anton may also want to add from an audit perspective. So some of the complications that we had this year related to, as previously discussed, prior period adjustments to do with LGFA. So there was some reworks required on annual report timeframes in and around that. We also had the initial delay due to the LTP. So that deferred the start times for us as well as for Audit New Zealand. They were two of the main reasons that we shifted those forward. In terms of costs, there's discussions with Audit New Zealand at the moment, which Anton may like to chip into as well.
Hi, good morning. As Jonathan has kind of sort of summarized it, I think, quite well. At the moment, we are still in waiting for the Office of the Auditor General to approve the amount that we can negotiate with management. So once we know that, we will talk to management first. But I think the positive going forward, we had a meeting, I think, in March with between Western Bay's finance team and us, and we said, okay, no, the past was the past, but what can we do going forward? And I think we've got quite a good plan going forward to try and make this a better process in the future.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Anton, and I hope you're feeling well, a little bit better than you did this morning, but sorry to hear you're not well. With the moderation that's occurring between yourselves and the Office of the Auditor General, is there some due consideration being given to two things? I noted that there was quite a bit of work around the prior period adjustments made on the LGFA shareholding values. And I understand that was primarily picked up, I think, because another council, might have been Tauranga, had the same issue. And probably from a materiality perspective, it would have been other shareholders of LGFA that have, significant exposures. Or when I say in terms of that restatement of the shareholder values, that I was kind of curious because I was that a missed ball previously?
Yeah, I mean,
Audit NZ.
Well, I think between everybody, I mean, the councils are the preparers, and then yes, we're the auditors. Yes, we did. From our side, we did miss that. So as part of the fee negotiation recoveries, we don't go to the OAG and say we want everything. We have to be quite reflective of what is our fault. So some of those things we will not be passing on to the.
Thank you. I hoped you'd say that, Anton.
Yeah.
But I thought I'd just give you the chance to mention that in front of the committee. And the other is, and very cognizant of the pressures that the government's decision to allow councils that 3-month postponement to the LTP, that was, I know, that was fairly critical to Audit New Zealand because it basically coincided with your existing quite congested capacity constraint given your duties to the government and around that time of year. And I know that, that certainly wasn't the fault of this council, given that they were given that option by the government. But it was pretty, I know in talking to your Auditor General that that's been a big, massive issue for Audit New Zealand, and the pressure on you folk that created. Will there be some due consideration around that in terms of the costs that would have inevitably brought to us in terms of the lack of capacity and, shall we say, the congestion that occurred, the bottleneck?
Yeah. So with that, like I said, anything that we have identified that is our responsibility, we're not going to pass on. However, any fee recovery is items we identified, for example, multiple sets of annual reports to check. I think it's in the audit fee letter. I think we work on 2 or 3 drafts where we have more than that, significantly more. Then we also, well, we had X number of drafts that we had to check, and each one takes a significant amount of time. therefore that's, council's responsibility, which shouldn't actually the LTP delay. The LTP is not, that doesn't contribute to the number of drafts we check.
Thanks, Anton. Do I have time for another question, Chair? Last one, promise. In the new recommendations and the 10 key new recommendations, the majority, to my mind, appear to be fairly standard in that they're the sort of thing that you wouldn't expect to immediately sort of become apparent with a council that's been doing this for some years, in the sense of there's nothing there that looks to me like, have we not been doing this properly in the past? I'd just be interested in your sort of broad view. I know you've been very active in talking to management, and you've reached out to me too, which thank you very much, because of some of my other capacities with other councils. And I know you're really looking to see that we get a lot of these niggly things. I call them the niggles, but they're the things that do ultimately creep up and congest timeframes and create these vortexes of indecision, you might call it. How, of those 10 new recommendations, are you feeling comfortable that we're on top of all of that in terms of the preparation for the next audit?
It's a bit hard to comment, because we did the work last year. We haven't actually started doing interims in that yet. So I do know on the agenda there is, I think one of the items is about how management is progressing. So we can check that. To me, the ones that sort of take up the most difficult, and the thing that can save the most time is for council, property, plant and equipment is the biggest asset. It's massive. It's really, councils effectively manage infrastructure assets. So the items around approval and timeliness of PP addition, disposals, and capital work in progress reconciliations, that will do the most to help speed up the audit, the quality of information for management reporting and an audit perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have Councillor Wickers.
Thank you. Yep, a couple of areas of questions. So on page 33 of the audit report, item 2.5 says a large number of misstatements and disclosure deficiencies. Can you explain to a layperson what that means?
So what that is the council will prepare initial draft annual report or set of financials as part of that. And when we test it, if we find an error, an example, if the number should have been 100, but the number is 120, then we'll say, well, you need to fix that up. So that would be a misstatement. A disclosure deficiency is where the accounting standards require disclosures in the notes. If you look in your notes to the financial statements, it will have a whole lot of things that should be disclosed. If we find any of those missing, that's as required by the standard, and it's a material disclosure, we will raise that for the council to correct.
Okay, so just the word used there is large. Is that normal?
No, this was unfortunately this last year there was quite a lot more than what we normally see.
Through the chair, and Jonathan might want to also comment as well. So what we've actually undertaken this year was implement a new system called Value Financials. It's a product from PwC. And it did require us to look at our mapping. So basically it takes from our general ledger and maps through into our actual physical reports. And looking at how those are all done is something that audit then reviewed. Some of those deficiencies or misstatements were as a result of moving to this new system, and Anton can probably talk to when people are implementing those new systems, there's a bit of work to understand and get that right, and also look at prior period adjustment. So it was the point of difference in this current year. Now that we've got it set up though, most have a smooth run into the second year. So that was one of the things that we're trying to improve. So there was a system that would provide the information that didn't require the manual intervention to eliminate those problems moving forward. In terms of some of those prior period adjustments, those are the sorts of things that come under the misstatements and did take a while for us to resolve because it did involve going back multiple years because we're not looking to sell those shares, but it did involve a number of different years in the prior years of which they had those impacts. So that's when the large comes in when you're dealing with multiple prior year adjustments as well.
And there's a second area that probably relates to that now that I've heard that answer. So it refers to more than 20 drafts of the annual report and a number of unofficial drafts. Is that a true reflect the reality of, is it a true statement?
Yes, that would be a true statement. And a lot of that, again, is reflective of moving to the value financial space.
Okay, based on the previous answers, that becomes irrelevant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Joyce.
So on page 16 of the audit report, but it's page, I think, 40 something of the 41 of the agenda. And we've touched on this already. Reconciliation of work in progress had not been occurring. So it seems the audit office has asked us to do it monthly, and we last did it in June 2023. So can staff explain to us why we stopped? Because this seems to be something that we should be surely, considering a large part of our budget is capital works. We should be tracking this. And how could we have stopped tracking in June 2023?
So this is a process, you're absolutely right, that we should be doing more regularly. It had only been done annually until that point, and then there was a lot of work done coming into the June 30, 24 year to get it into alignment. We've now got a specific resource in that assets area, so we had resource challenges, getting the right person in that seat, and we've now got someone in there to help us clean that up well ahead of the 25 June year-end position.
Okay. I mean, in other systems, one is Ozone, right, which I know is on the way out, but large number of generic user accounts. I mean, other organizations won't allow any generic user accounts. They might allow shared accounts, but they're all put to one name, so that person is responsible for them, for example. And the audit office has picked up on that, 90 generic user accounts. So is there a way we can change that? I know we sometimes need shared accounts, and it talks about that in the recommendation, but it should all be shared at home, so one person's responsible for each account, surely.
The explanation for that is on the next paper.
Yeah, it's explained, but I don't accept the explanation that we need them. I think there's other ways of doing
Should we
it.
discuss that when hold that question until we get to that?
Yep, sure. And the other one is Waka Kotahi undertook an audit of council and WSP in relation to emergency works. Did that find anything majorly wrong? This is regarding overclaimed funds from NZTA. It says it came back clear, but what prompted the audit? I mean, are they auditing everybody, or were they just unhappy? So they're auditing everybody. Okay, that's right.
Sorry, what point is that in the report?
That's on page 56, the agenda.
Sorry, let me just.
Page 31 of the
Okay.
the item. Yep.
That was sorry. So NZTA does do audits from time to time of each council. Obviously, as we know that this happened in 2019, 2020. And looking back at all of that, that's all come back clear. So that's why we've actually closed the matter. So we're saying that, you know, it's all resolved. We're not, obviously processes and that seem to be it. NZTA must be happy now, and we haven't noticed anything.
Meeting. Question? Sorry, I didn't hear that. Yeah, my question is probably more for staff, but what assurance do we have that will be a smoother process next time with fewer errors, but more importantly on time, both for the annual plan and annual report audits? Because, you know, after COVID and various difficulties there, things got delayed, and there are valid reasons for that, but it's really important. We need to get back onto doing these things on time. So I'm looking for assurance from staff as to that these things will be on time going forward.
So the process for this year's annual report has already begun. We've looked and worked with Anton as well to pick off some big items early. We've got a detailed annual report plan this year, which we haven't had sufficiently enough in the past. And we've also discussed that with audit in terms of their timeframes. And I think Anton's table item number 1 is the audit plan for this year as well, which we'll discuss shortly as to how we can look to achieve audit timeframes as well as our own internal timeframes.
I remember saying the timetable for the annual report sign off is 31st October, which is the legislative deadline, I understand. And it's also a slightly awkward time for us in terms of elections and so on. So it's important that we hit that deadline, but even preferably before that. Yeah, absolutely. So our internal deadlines will ensure that we're ahead of the game in terms of audit. So if audit's got any room to come earlier or to move their timeframes, then we will be ready for those internally. And maybe Anton can add his thoughts to that as well.
Yes, so we've planned and resourced everything, our audit for interim and even a bit of a pre-final audit this year to try help knock out some of the bigger items maybe before the main audit. And so the plan is that we'll be done by 31st of October in time. I'm not too sure when the council's actual first council meeting is, but we have planned to meet that deadline. And so, yeah, I know what, you know, sorry, I'm maybe just jumping the gun, but I know some of my other councils are using the Audit and Risk Committee for whenever their last meeting is towards the end of September, somewhere there, just to have a look at the draft annual reports or financials, just and you know, just give it a bit of a shake up and then sort of recommend to the new council, because it'll be why they were comfortable with the annual report at that point in time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Henry.
Oh, thank you, Murray.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know, it's all right. Okay. I have been waiting. Yes, the times that we had last year were somewhat challenging for staff and for councillors when we were dealing with some, you know, our program of work as well as still operating on the approving the long-term plan. And so I appreciate that for the auditors, that would be challenging as well too, going through that with this council and others, as you probably have throughout the country. I do, first of all, I just wonder whether I could have explained what AS built check sheet is. Is that a program or something? What is that?
It's built. It's as built, isn't it? As it's finished.
Oh, right, as it changed, yeah. So I'm going to refer to one comment, but I felt that there was a little bit of, well, I had a little bit of concern, and the comment that I'm picking up on now is on page 52 in our notes, page 27 in the audit. We recommend that all supporting documents are maintained and readily available for checks as and when required. Well, I imagine that that is what would be normally expected when an audit comes. And then we've got the progress that we had challenges with the district council to really provide all sporting documents to confirm assets additions agreed to the as-built. And so there's a note there that that framework it's been rectified with the management framework for that. But is it something to do with what you were talking about with Councillor Wickers about why there would have been some difficulties with getting material ready for the auditors?
Through the chair. So the as-built information relates to the assets that council builds, and we get information back from the contractors in terms of the components, and then we take that information back into our system to be able to capitalise the asset, to be able to then have it in our asset system for our year-end results. The timing of when some of those projects finish are always interesting. It doesn't obviously normally complete in a nice year-end position. And then we have to wait sometimes on the contractor to get the information through to us. So there are some challenges sometimes in getting that. We have worked on improving our processes to get that as-built information completed on time. And it has become obviously more important this year with a very large capital program that we're ahead of the game in terms of making sure the information is available. We have an asset system as well as our accounting system, which we maintain across our asset information. So the two come together and make sure that the two systems reconcile. But as Jonathan pointed out, we've had a resource this year focusing on making sure that our information is complete and ready for year end.
Okay, Councillor Joyce.
Just going back to that point about this being the last scheduled Audit and Risk Committee meeting, and we've got an annual report coming up. So just wanted to perhaps ask the CEO or whoever, how will we handle the annual report between now and the election, please? Want to go to a council meeting, or how's it planned to make sure we have some reporting before the election?
So, councillors, I think the arrangement in talking with Anton and with Adele, it doesn't look like the annual report will be able to be signed off before the election timeframe. But the intention is to basically do as much audit work as possible and have draft accounts ready for annual report for this council. And you will probably see those in September. And then, although they can't be approved as final, but the idea would be basically we've done pretty much a hard close and we've got the financials to a state where we're comfortable. You would know the position of the council at that date, but we wouldn't be able to sign them off because audit won't have completed the audit.
Sure. So will they be made public at that point as draft accounts?
No, not until they're actually signed off.
Okay, so the public won't know where we are. And how current will the information be then in the election economic update, financial update?
Adele can answer that.
Through the chair. So as part of the information that we provide for elections is called a pre-election report, which is ultimately a forecast of where we see the end of this year, as well as all the information on the projects that are coming up. So it's a 3-year historical view and a forecast view as well, but includes the wider what's happening and what would be of interest for people who might want to see in for council.
So it'll contain a taste of the annual report.
The pre-election report always comes out before councillors finalise their current year, so it's not unusual. So it's always forecasted where we'll be. Hopefully we will have a pretty good idea in August where that will be. So we will have some good numbers. That's my expectation. But we don't usually have anything finalised because the pre-election report comes out before that.
I understand that, but at least the public will get a taste of where we are. That's good.
Yes.
Thanks, Murray. Sorry. Just on the audit timetable for the annual report audit. So do you have a date? And I'm sorry if it's been tabled, but just some clarification of the date that you intend to be in council for audit, the beginning of the final audit.
I'm just trying to see my timetable quickly on the audit plan. So we plan to do interim towards the end of June. And then we plan to do a second interim, or almost like a bit more of a pre-final in middle of August, where hopefully, depending on what the council has ready, if we can clear off some of the final numbers in advance of the final audit to try and take a bit of pressure off the final audit. And then the final audit we start on 22nd of September.
22nd of September.
Yes.
So by the 22nd of September, you'll be expecting a pretty complete draft annual report.
Yes.
Yep. And that, and it's quite tight.
Sorry, can you?
It's pretty tight. 22
it
September, 31 October.
Yeah.
And given that, you know, we all know that prior to the statutory, we're going to be wanting to have a confirmation that in terms of the final audit is available. I just I look at the last 5 years, I just can't see that. I can't see it being done. Can perhaps you and management give me some comfort that that's actually doable? I just don't think it's doable. Sorry.
Just comment, councillors. The statutory deadline is the 31st of October. The new council is not likely to be sworn in before that date either, Stu.
Yes.
So there is not probably the opportunity to actually approve the annual report from the new council. I would expect the first opportunity would be sometime in November or early December in practical terms. And that's probably the case for quite a large number of councils across the country. I think Anton can comment on that. It's not ideal, but it is a problem because we've got this election in between.
And that's kind of going to my point a bit in that we're going to be starting pretty late. I mean, September 22 is late in terms of auditors coming in for the final. Now, I know that that's because we're in that classification of bad boys, bad girls. Because we were late this year. And it, you know, what I'm hearing is that best will in the world, we're not actually going to meet the statutory, folks. So does one prepare for that fact already to say, well, best will in the world, folks, we're just not, because as you say, even if in late September, well, no, it'd be early October, which is right at the election time, you're not going to be able to meet the statutory requirements under the Act. Even if Audit New Zealand give us the thumbs up on 20th of October or 25th of October in terms of their audit. I'm curious, somebody please tell me that I'm reading this absolutely wrong.
I've just put a little bit of context around it in terms of the plan and the intention going forward after this year is to meet the statutory deadline, obviously. So we'll be back in that group. That's the plan. The issue has been exacerbated for this council and a number of councils because there was a decision made to delay the LTP by a number of months. That put a large group of councils into basically on track for not being able to meet statutory deadline for the annual report. So as soon as that delay was decided or approved at council, it didn't really allow for us to be in the first pack of councils being able to be audited. So this is a knock-on effect of not being able to deliver on the LTP deadline. And there's not an anticipation that we will be in that space again. Some of that was actually brought about because of the government making changes at the last minute. And also council made an assessment about its preparedness at the time. And I'm sure it worked out that it wasn't able to do everything and make the changes. So it is a bit of a one-off, and the intention is we will be back on track next year.
Okay. I'm just gonna repeat myself on this, and it really bothers me is that this council, along with some other councils, is being penalised as we speak for being late, for not meeting the statutory, and it's a pecking order that comes through from Audit New Zealand and the OAG, because they've got their responsibilities. The government first, bang, 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 gets to local government. Everybody that's been fine, they get served first. We will be at the back of the pack. If we, and I see that we won't make the statutory. I'll put a bet on it today that we won't be. And therefore that will again put us into that category with Audit New Zealand for next year. We're just not going to get out of it until we get a change to the start of our audit. Our audit has to begin earlier, or we're never going to make that cut. Now, in anticipation of us highly likely not being able to meet the statutories this year through no fault of our own, should, and this is my question to you, Anton, and also to management, should we be anticipating this with some discussion with central government, DIA, now to say, best will in the world, this isn't going to happen because we've got an election in May, as well as the congestion of previous years, as well as the fact that our audit doesn't start until the 22nd of September. Do we put that on the table to take the heat off everybody? Because it seems to me that we're going into another stressed situation for our management team. Equally, to you, Anton, a very stressed situation for Audit New Zealand. And I'm sort of asking, so why?
New council.
The new council is going to come in, and I just ask that. What do you think, Anton? Am I hitting the mark all right, or am I way off the mark?
No, I think realistically, if the council meeting is not on 31 October and it is in November, yes, it is a statutory breach. But at the time, we didn't know when we issued this, we didn't know when the first council meeting is. So if we can be updated when that is, we can update the dates on the audit plan. Having said that, if for next year, if the council delivers really well, the audit goes well, we come in on budget, I will push as hard as I can from my side to say that next year the council's turn things around. Let's start earlier. They can be one of the forefront councils. But it depends how this year goes.
It's been taped. Thanks, Anton. Sorry.
And just to follow on from Anton's comment through the chair, so we have been working closely with Audit all of this year to look at that timetable, noting that it was the elections, and looking to what we can do as early as possible, as we've discussed. So we're trying to bring forward work that would normally be done in the final audit into the interim audit. And so I think Jonathan sort of made a few of those points about what we can actually do. So then the final audit, when it starts on the 22nd of September, is ultimately just that wrap up. We are cognizant that we do want to, the whole goal of this year was to have it signed off in the statutory timelines. And we've been doing everything to try and achieve that. So if the final went well, we've still got some time before, although it's interregnum, that we could get it signed off. And what we have committed to, though, is with this council, we will have the most up-to-date information that should be reasonably final, subject to audit, that we'll be putting in front of this council before they go into elections. So it's really interregnum. So we have been very, very conscious of this, and we do want to deliver. And so we've been having those conversations, as I said, in conjunction with audit to see what we can do to achieve that.
Okay, Councillor Revenge. Oh, hang on, just a minute.
I just wish to add to the point that Adele made. Going forward, we're not going to meet the statutory deadline this year, but in terms of next year, all the plans in terms of annual plan and annual report, we've going to closely project manage those and be much more onto the deadline and the planning for that. So my anticipation is we will be able to meet the deadlines next year for audit. We'll be ready for Anton and the team when they come in. We've been like that in the past, and there's no reason why we can't be back on the right timeframes. We hopefully won't have any other legislative changes that come in at the last minute that will affect all of local government, but all things being equal at the moment, the intention is we will meet all our deadlines next year.
I think it just concerns me that it could well end up being a really fine election issue. The incompetence of, and it'll be blamed onto we councillors for the incompetence that we haven't met our obligation. I'd just like to pursue with Stuart, if I might. You mentioned that it could be timely to speak directly to the Department of Internal Affairs and notify them of the predicament that we're in, knowing that our CEO is saying that she's confident that she can meet the targets. But should we be actually asking the department that we have had the problem and it's not all of our making, and we should be able to have some flexibility? Is that what you were asking for, Stuart?
It's not so much flexibility. Sorry. I don't think it's so much flexibility. I mean, personally, I don't see a major problem with, as we've seen in the past, you don't meet the statutories and everybody turns around and says, yep, well, we've pushed them out. So it's a case of, hey, we're not going to. It's not through any fault of ours that we won't be able to. It's a congestion of predicament that here it is. It's just plain to see. Now, giving you advance notice that this is the case. It's, the world's not going to end because you haven't met the statutories, or that there is. But what does concern me is that by not meeting the statutories, you continue. And Anton has said, and that's giving me some nice comfort, that, hey, we won't hold you guys to account if you don't meet it this time, especially if you've done everything right in terms of giving us what we wanted on time. So I just want, and I think to your point, and to councillors here, and it's a really good point that you make, Margaret, is that by doing that, you're safeguarding the governors here, that we're anticipating we're doing our jobs properly. But folks down in Wellington, be aware of this. And so it isn't an incompetence issue. It's a full acknowledgement by everybody around this table that this is the here and now, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. I think it's good for you as governors. I think it's really good for management because it takes undue stress off them because it's not their fault, and it also, I have a lot of sympathy for Audit New Zealand, given what the cards they've been dealt with by the regulatory changes. So I think that that's an acknowledgement, and it's a good one. It would be a good one. It's not that you're looking to get any answer back. It's just, we're telling you, this is what's going on.
So should we formalise that? If Stuart was prepared to move it, I'm more than happy to second such a motion.
I think we just leave that with management to carry through. I leave it with management to carry through on that one and make sure that everybody's knows what the situation is. I don't think we need a formal motion for that.
I think the councillors themselves should be making that decision and not leaving it to management. I think that's what the Audit and Risk Committee is for, for us to assess where we're at. And in support of management, I think listening to Stuart, who's much more experienced than most of us, then it would be a sensible thing to do. So I'm still saying I'm happy to second the motion that we notify the Department of Internal Affairs of the predicament that we're finding ourselves in, and at the same time, and you've got the power to do that, Mr. Chairman, as Chairman.
I'm happy to put forward that motion on your behalf, and in the sense that we make a the council actually makes a notification to DIA that this is the lie of the land, folks. You should know that it's highly unlikely, because of these situations, that we're not going to meet the statutory.
Do you have a motion before you?
Well, we need some actual wording.
Well, yeah, and I think that in terms of putting the wording around that, if we could suggest that the wording is agreed between with management in terms of being finalised, or wordsmithing, and that I'm happy, or if the chair wishes to approve those. I mean, it's difficult to put this into specific words right now, unless I keep it generic. Are you happy for me to keep it generic, folks?
Well, if it's going to be a motion and we're going to vote on it, we need to have the actual wording.
I think the motion is that we inform the Department of Internal Affairs and leave it to staff and Mr. Henderson to work out the detail that would be included in such a letter.
Well, with respect, when I suggested we leave it to management before, you didn't like that. So now you're saying we leave it to management. So
it's for.
Do you want to contribute to that?
Well, Mr. Chair, can I suggest that we leave this matter lay on the table for now and discuss it over morning tea, and if need be, it can come back to later in the meeting.
Excellent idea.
It's a great idea.
Right. Yeah, you're second to it.
I did want to ask a question which kind of cuts across the need for this, potentially at least, and that is that I'm relatively comfortable that we don't meet statutory because they're simply not sworn in elected members for the 3 weeks before the 31st of October. But I am concerned about what Stuart Henderson is saying in terms of it puts us behind for next year. We've heard comfort that from the chief executive and Anton that may not be the case, but I just wonder, is it possible to alleviate that by actually signing or adopting the annual report before 31st of October by getting the councillors sworn in, because they should be able to be sworn in soon after mid-October. You normally we go through our induction before we get sworn in. It ends up being in November, but some councillors do it a little bit earlier than that. And just as an idea that it may be a way to get the thing signed off to meet that deadline and to get into the premier group, should we say? but this is, but I'm also conscious that, you know, we're sort of making decisions ahead of, you know,
But this
how
is,
the process works.
look, folks, this is really good. This is a good conversation, and it's probably one of the most appropriate conversations to be having, given it's our final audit risk and finance meeting before the end of the term. And I actually really like it's brought about this conversation, which we weren't going to have. And that was, well, actually, we're not going to meet the statutory based on what we currently know. And the mayor has, I think, cut through the Gordian knot here a little bit, in that actually, if there is if there's the possibility that the new council can meet to approve the annual report, there is that whisker of a knot, based on what Anton is saying, that he's confident that they're going to be able to have the ready for adoption by the new council prior to the 31st of October. What's the earliest point the new council can meet to adopt? And what is that? Could somebody please let me know?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are unlikely to have confirmed declared results until at the earliest, somewhere between the 14th to the 17th of October. I'm also mindful that we have to have an inaugural meeting first. And so we'd have to have 2 meetings in the 2 weeks before the 31st of October.
Yep.
Potentially doable, but very, very tight.
Thank you.
And the other complicating factor is it's very difficult because you don't know the composition of the new council, and they will have to be inducted to understand what they're going to sign off on. So it's not the done thing to do that at their first meeting. And also you can't always assume that they're going to approve it, because they might not know what they are approving. So that's why we don't do it in October.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so. Well, we still on Margaret's point, or I'll take Alan's question.
Basically, sir, it's, to me, I think we're coming to a good solution here. I really have confidence that our CEO will make sure we meet, or the council can meet the requirements next year. And so I have confidence in that. That's great. So we cross that one off. But I am concerned about the stress that comes with this everywhere. And to be honest, the reputational risk that council is, and that's what we are, we're a risk and audit sort of, that's this committee right now. So to front foot this by giving notification, I think will be important. And I agree that, yes, let's have it, come back later after a cup of tea and a chance to discuss the actual motion. Makes a lot of sense. And let's just front foot it. There's too many ifs, buts, and very hairline opportunities coming up for us to make the deadline.
Okay, so we've got Deputy Mayor has suggested we leave it lie on the table. You're seconding that, Councillor Sol? Sorry? Let it lie on the table till we've had a discussion and got some wording. All right, so that's well.
I will speak to that. I agree with it, so we can have a better conversation. But I just
Point of order, you can't speak to it. Point of order, you
just like
can't
to
speak to
remind
it.
everybody.
So that we have a motion to let it lie on the table. We have it seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Well, as we're now, we don't have a problem. I'd just like to remind councillors that there's not one of us who can assume that we will be back at this council. So our own reputation is on the line.
We'll discuss that over morning tea. Right. Okay. Where are we up to? Did you still wish to comment, Councillor Joyce? Pardon? Did you still wish to comment?
I just wanted to mention the fact that every council, bar one in the country, has an election at that time. So everybody's in the same boat. I'm not sure DIA really even needs to hear from us, because bar Tauranga City, every other council's got the same problem.
Councillor Murray.
Question, sir. On page 39, there's oh, no, it's not there. The recommendation on the service requests I thought was excellent, and I'd like from audit, and it talks about the need to sign off and to record the service requests. And can I give some advice to senior staff that for the new councillors coming into this organisation, it's really important that they know how to get information from staff.
And the question is, what's the question?
And my question is, the service request system has not been operating properly. And can we be assured that the new councillors will be advised as to how they get information from this place? The service request system didn't operate well, and then Charlene, under Miriam's management, has been the go-to person that we've found excellent. And so I'd just like to think, I don't want to see any future councillor in the predicament that I found myself in, not being able to get the information. Certainly under Miriam, it's not an issue, but you don't know who's the new CEO, and we don't know the new councillor composition. So I'd just like to know that there is a better system of informing councillors of their rights and their involvement as to how they get information for their community representatives. And also, sir, as I'm on the job, we are a service organisation, and being able to get the information as quickly as possible for the community is absolutely vital for the reputation of any council.
We'll leave that for Rachel on the induction process. So we have Councillor Henry.
I tend to disagree with Margaret. I think that the service centre, the frontline staff out here perform brilliantly. And in my experience, that there is a lag, though, you're absolutely correct. And it isn't with the service centre. It's between, and I've talked to people about how long do you wait. It's when it's delivered to the departments that the service request relates to. So I talk to various people and I say, well, when do you pick up on this? When it hits my desk. So it's not the service centre.
We're not having a debate on service centre.
I know, but I just feel I should defend them.
We're meant to be asking questions of the auditor, not debating service requests.
People always get it.
It wasn't the question.
Right. Jonathan, are you going to talk about the other table item that we got last night?
Yes, absolutely. So the table item
we've been talking about.
Yeah. So through the chair, so the table item last night is really a summary of the discussion we've been having. So it provides the next steps really for audit for the annual report 25 and the key dates that we've been talking to over the last discussion are on page 20 of that report. I'm not sure if Anton wants to add anything to those comments. That's the audit plan, Anton, that you've recently provided through to management.
Yeah, I think the key points I just wanted to raise is our focus areas, being the one is the risk of management override of internal controls. We have that for all our audits. There's a risk that all management can override controls. So that's a standard risk. And we kind of look at things like the journals, any accounting estimates, and any unusual or one-off transactions. The other area is this year there's the revaluation of land and buildings. There's a lot of judgment involved in what would the value of land and buildings be. So we spend quite a bit of time looking at that. Then this year as well, the infrastructure assets won't be revalued. There'll be a fair value assessment to confirm that the value is not materially different from the carrying value. So management needs to prepare a fair value assessment, which we'll look at. We will encourage management to look at that early so that we can look at it early because we don't want to get surprises in September, October. The other area, which we put in for all our councils, but we had it in the past here, is just looking at PPE around impairment, the capitalization of assets, and the work in progress, and especially some of those bigger projects that we've listed, such as Te Puke wastewater plant, Katikati plant upgrades, the Makaroa structure plan. Those are the key areas of focus. However, we still do look at things like revenue, expenditure, payroll, debtors and creditors, but that's just the most significant areas. The other, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what page that would be on your agenda, but on my order plan would be page 11, is our materiality, which will be of interest. We've set overall materiality at 150 million. That is, which is we've used for revaluation materiality of assets. So when management does the fair value assessment, they need to look at that the assets are individually and in aggregate, the fair value movement will not be above 150 million. Then for all other items, we've set materiality at 4 million. So anything below that, we would not consider material. The other areas which I think will be of interest, we also look, because there's not only financials, we also look at non-financial reporting. The key measures we'll look at is the drinking of safety water. That's your like bacterial compliance protozoa, the water loss measure. Wastewater, we look at any compliance with your consents, and any fault response times, where somebody asks, how long does it take to resolve any wastewater overflows? Sorry about that. On roading, we look at just this same issue we raised last year, responsiveness to any service requests for roading. And we also look at the smooth travel exposure. And then because council does have a high growth, we also look at how long resource and building consents take as per the measures you've got in your LTP. And then the timing we have discussed. So I'm not sure if there's any other questions.
Right, any questions for Anton on that one before I go to Councillor Joyce? Just on that roading one, we had NZTA do a audit of our roading not so long ago. So how does Audit New Zealand do that? You're not going to go out and drive our roads, are you? So how does that work for?
Yeah, so we I'm not sure which particular audit NZTA you're referring to, because they sometimes look at the financial compliance for claims. So we're obviously not going to reinvent the wheel on that. We'll just have a look at it if they've raised anything in their reports to see if it could impact our audit. Generally, there isn't, they might just have a few recommendations that doesn't really impact our opinion. The other thing on the smooth travel exposure, in the past, each council has sort of got its own expert and done the testing, and then we relook at the work they've done to confirm the results. I think this year NZTA has co-opted, sorry, and council can just jump in if our management, if I've got this wrong, the timing wise, but they've co-opted in somebody to do it for all the councils. So we'll just have a look at those processes to make sure that the results come and agree to what NZTA has said.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. I had two questions on the audit report. Firstly, we talk about the work in progress, and it says the council had a significant work in progress balance at 30th June, with the risk that some projects within the balance sheet balance may have been abandoned and should be written off. The council should analyse the aging work in progress balances by year and consider whether any old balances should be written off or impaired. So my question is, what are these work in progress projects, and is it likely that any are or should be written off or impaired. I mean, there's some work in progress projects like, Mokwa Instruction Plan will clearly be ongoing for a number of years. So I just want to make sure we're not unnecessarily scaring ourselves that these are about to be written off. But if there are genuinely projects where there is an issue, I'd like to get a heads up.
So that's certainly a significant piece of work that we've got a resource looking at for us at the moment to understand each and every project and making sure that we've got the correct treatment, whether they need to be written off or whether there's some CapEx sitting in the OpEx side as well that needs to be brought into those projects.
Okay, so I appreciate his work. There's nothing you can really update us on at this point.
Not at this point. No.
Okay, and the second one, and this is on page 8 of the paper. It talks about in November 23, risk pool made a call on member councils to fund quantified shortfalls. So the question is, how much was our share and what is the future risk?
So our share to date in this financial year has been $18,000. And that's been called and paid for in the financial year.
And is it likely that's more call-ins will be required in the future?
Future calls depend on where the risk pool and any future natural disasters that occur. That's a bit of an unknown.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll just add to that, there is some outstanding claims at the moment, and so we have received a letter. We haven't been notified of what funds may be required for that call.
Just similar to your line, Murray, but you asked about roading. I was going to ask the same question about the Three Waters, right? Because we're going to have two different organisations being our regulator, TA and the Commerce Commission. So, do we really need Audit New Zealand looking at the same area as a third regulator, or is that getting a little bit excessive?
So from our perspective, we're not doing regulating. We're just seeing if any decisions made either by the council or regulators would have an impact on the annual report in the disclosures. It's not your actual, decisions that you're making.
But you're also looking at response times and things, which is surely TA's area. That's not a financial matter. That's how quickly we respond to issues, and that is very much an environmental issue, right? So I'm just think we're just wanting a little bit potentially off piste here. It's not a financial issue how quickly we respond to spills, for example.
Yeah. So in our requirements are to also look at the non-financial reporting that you have signaled in your long-term plan. How you've set targets. So part of that is to audit those measures that you signal to the community, the level of service. The DIA has set some uniform measures, not necessarily the target, but the measures. But each council can still set their own measures, targets and other measures. So that's why it forms part of the annual report, and we also have to audit those results.
So it may well be that it's resolved by the fact that the regulator will put in place measures which will replace what we put into our long-term plan, because they're going to control that, not us.
Through the chair, yes, we'll obviously go through a period of transition. We'll be waiting to see what comes through in the final legislation on water services and what we required in the water services strategy in the new organisation. But they will have clear regulatory requirements around what they're going to have to do and how they're going to perform and how they're going to be measured. It'll look quite different than what we were at today. We all, at the moment, we're still required to meet the requirements under the Local Government Act. And so it's at a point in time where council does remove that and it is into a new council controlled organisation and subject to the new legislative requirements. And we have to do an LTP amendment to make those changes before it can conform with the new CCO requirements.
Exhausted the questions. So thank you very much for joining us online, Anton. And Yeah. Yeah. So we need to receive that report. Where are we up to here? So moving a second to that Chief Financial Officer's report dated 4th of June entitled Audit Management Report 2023-24 be received. Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Seconded, Deputy Mayor. All those in favour? Against, carried. Again, thank you, Anton, for your time. Appreciate that. We'll see you again.
Thank you very much.
Right, Darren's been waiting patiently in the corner there, so over to you, Darren, and we're moving back to 10.1 on page 7.
Thank you, and I do apologise. I was late to today's meeting. Not a great start. So I'll give you a quick update on the people workforce report to begin with, and then Clint's here to join us to take us through the health and safety update. So it has been a really busy quarter, but a successful quarter for the team. There's a number of big initiatives on within the group, significant projects around Workday, which is the HRIS implementation, our leadership development initiative, and other core BAU activities, which we tend to run on an annual basis around remuneration reviews and those types of things. So there's some really good statistics that have come through for that previous quarter. So you can see the total number of employees has decreased from 9 from 342 to 333. Actual FTE level decreased again from 310 to 304. Pleasing to see that the turnover continues to decrease, so 10.9% for the previous quarter down to 9.3, which is fantastic. The average vacancy rate increased from 5.7 to 10.1. So we had a bit of an anomaly there. I expect our vacancy rate to sit around that 10% all the time. So that's gone back to what I expect to see. The absenteeism rate also increased slightly from the all-time low of 2.81% back up to 3.56%, which is still really, really good. So we've had another really healthy quarter. The caveat is that we're about to go into the winter months, and there have been informal reports of high levels of COVID and flu starting to kick in. So we'll see how this quarter tracks. So yeah, overall, just quite a pleasing result. A busy time as usual. So are there any questions on the people component of the report? Then I'll hand over to Clint for a summary.
We have one from the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I note the change in number of employees, but also that's to 31st of March. Are you able to tell me what the current number of employees and the number of FTEs is as of today?
So yeah, I can tell you that the current number of employees, I think it's about 328 as of today, but it does fluctuate a little bit from that perspective. So that's actual headcount within the building. Probably the best way to look at it is how we've been tracking year on year. And so our current FTE at the moment is 338, but our proposed opening FTE, given the changes that we've been making throughout the last quarter, will be 331, and that's due to
FTE.
That's FTE.
Because we're down at 304 FTE.
So that's for the previous
So
quarter.
it says the actual FTE level decreased from 310 to 304. So I'm assuming if the total number of employees has gone from 342 to 333 to 328 as of today, then the FTE should be in about 300 or thereabouts.
So no, that's the FTE is the full-time equivalent. So the headcount can be quite different due to the number of employees that could be working part-time, etc. So full-time equivalent equals the number of employees that we'd have approved at the 40-hour ratio.
So I'm still understanding why your FTE, which is as of 31st of March is 304, you're telling me now is 338.
It could be the difference. You can see if you're looking at the actual approved FTE.
I think the question is, how can you have more FTEs than employees?
That's another way of looking at it.
Yeah, so I'm a bit unsure of the specific question and what we're referring to. So it could be just a bit of a.
We might be at cross purposes. Happy to chat later if that's.
Yeah, I can take you
Through
through
the chair, Darren, I think you might have talked about FTEs rather than total headcount. So can you just refer to what your opening position is for FTE and potential headcount, just for clarification?
So I'll just read the workforce capacity section of the report, which will go, look, the FTE approved level as at the 31st of March 25 is 341.33. And so that's compared to 335 as December 24. And the actual FTE level is 304.02. So the difference between the approved FTE level and the actual FTE level there. So we're approved for 341, but our current FTE is in 304. So that's due to carrying the number of vacancies within the organisation.
Okay, so that's quite a lot of vacancies, and I'm trying to divine, where we're heading with this. Are we about to, gain another 30, 35 employees, or are we not? Because I'm interested in actual people who are there being paid money.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what we're looking at.
Yeah, so understand. So it's very clear. We know that we've been very intentional about our recruitment and making decisions around vacancies. And so we've made some decisions already, and we've reduced the number of roles. We've actually disestablished those vacancies, which will be moving into the opening FTE 1st of July 26. So we've been quite intentional around that space. We'll continue to be very intentional. All vacancies going up to GMs at executive on a Monday, and we have good discussion around that. So we are looking at every opportunity to manage our headcount very, very effectively, and we're clear about the direction that we need to take that.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Murray-Bench.
I'm reading the report. I couldn't help but think we clearly are a good employer. Can I ask though, please, is it, when we advertise, is it the best person for the job, or do we have other requirements in there?
No, it's certainly best person for the job.
No diversity requirements or anything?
We do not have any set diversity policies.
Very pleased.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce. You know what? Right, Gio, moving on to Councillor Salt.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, well, basically, I don't like padded out reports and stuff that we have at times. And again, it's going along the line just asked. We were told at the last meeting we don't have a DEI policy. Cool. And so we still basically seem to be measuring ethnicity. For what reason? I don't know what the risk is, number one. So that would be my first question. What is the risk of ethnicity as opposed to people as being asked best for the job? And I guess the other thing is, even why the heck are we asking ethnicity? Because we're looking for the best people for the job. That's my question, sir.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So from our perspective, it's just really interesting to understand the makeup of the organisation. So that's post the recruitment process. It's nice to know the demographics of our organisation. You can see that the report holds a lot of information, statistics about different demographics, and ethnicity happens to be one. So that just comes into once people are employed within the organisation. We like to know who we are.
So can I ask, so we actually have a query when people apply for a job, their ethnicity is asked for?
Not when they apply for the job.
So, sir, when do we find out their ethnicity?
So we find out through the onboarding process, where we capture a whole lot of demographics and personal information about age, emergency contacts, a little bit extra information around that at that point in time. So it's on the onboarding process. It's not upfront.
So another part, To another part to this then, sir, in looking at other risks which are there, how are we looking at managing the issue that you've got in there as far as age is concerned? Okay, now, obviously, there's a lot of, from the service that we have, there's a lot of, from people in here for some years, etc. There's a lot of knowledge and so on, and you've stressed that that is a very much a real risk, and I totally agree it is. And we've actually, I believe, suffered from the loss of a lot of knowledge in the last few years. How are we looking at improving that issue so that as people do come to retirement, that we have perhaps, or are we looking at, say, employing more intermediate type staff that have quite a bit of knowledge and background and experience in the industry that either they're working in or department they're working in, and getting them that knowledge? Is there some sort of structure that we have to try to achieve better continuity and so on with the staff and the expertise?
Yeah, there are a number of things that we proactively do in this space, and more recently we've had another push on what we call Nintex Process Manager, which we've revitalised within the organisation, which is effectively a way to capture key knowledge around really important processes and information within the organisation. So that's one way that we can do it. The other way is effectively by understanding that there might be a problem coming for us in the future. So that's why it's really important that we are reporting on these demographics so that we can actually highlight things like that. So there's many different ways that we can do that. One is we have, we think we are a really good organisation. We have great conversations with our people, and we like to be really open about what their plans are. And quite often they'll sit with us, they'll talk to us about their plans to retire. And those are really good opportunities for us to front foot that, bring in a supporting resource to make sure that we're transferring over that knowledge. It could mean that we're bringing in individuals to shadow people during that time. So there's lots of levers that we can pull to mitigate the risk of those coming in for us. So it's not just one thing.
It's just knowing that we are doing it.
Did you want to comment, Miriam? No.
This is not my question, but I'm presume that when an employee fills out the form that they don't need to fill in the ethnicity if they don't wish to.
No, they don't need to.
That's an option.
Yeah, it's an option.
Yeah. Thank you. My question is around the quite elaborate graph, or I can't remember what the graph's called when you see them going down like that, for the transport team when that was presented to us when we came in-house. And I see that you've got in the last time period of your reporting, you had 31 in the previous period, we've only got 3 now. And I'm assuming that some of those would have been the fulfillment of the transport hierarchy, that in-house transport team. And you might not be able to answer this, but are those positions all filled? And I'm saying this because we have our GM of infrastructure is left the building on holiday, so we can't ask him that. So can you shed any light on that?
So what's the specific question is about are all those roles filled at the moment?
All those roles filled, yeah.
Yeah, we're pretty good. We had a big recruitment push, obviously, when we bought the transport team in-house. And obviously you see the numbers over those years, you spike because our employee and our FTE count went up significantly during that period, making those decisions. And so they've got a couple of vacancies in there, like everybody does tend to have across the organisation. But again, we're being really intentional about what we do with those vacancies moving forward. But the structure is pretty well full.
So is there consideration whether those vacancies will be needed, or are you intending to fill them?
There's always consideration around whether the vacancies are needed, but it's also given that the transport structure is relatively new. We always need to be looking at, is it working well? Are there other opportunities to redesign work to make sure that we're more effective? It's a really young team, and they're doing a fantastic job in that space. And so they'll be growing, and we'll be really deliberate about those kind of decisions moving forward.
I doubt whether we'll get another report from you unless we return again. But I would say that that would be something, if I was at the table, that I would still be very concerned about, because as you said, it's in its infancy. Whilst I think it's a great idea, it's something that I'd be very keen to watch and see how that progresses.
Yeah, they're doing a fantastic job on delivering. So, it was a big effort to bring it in-house. That's for sure. And I think you're all aware at that time when it did happen.
Right. We have Councillor Daly.
Yeah, Darren, just one of the metrics you've got here is the age demographics and an emerging risk. But the fact that the infrastructure group is represented by 25% in the 61 plus years age bracket, followed closely by corporate services group. So my question is, traditional roles in infrastructure maybe have been male employees. So I'm just wondering what the breakdown in the infrastructure group between male and female is. And I would tend to think that a lot of these people at that advanced age, like myself, have probably been here for quite a long time and subject to ongoing annual pay rises. So would that tend to skew the gender pay gap, the fact that we've got sort of that upper maybe weighted balance towards older males in the infrastructure group especially? But you've also pointed out that the gender pay gap in New Zealand is currently 8.2%, whereas our council gender pay gap is about 14%. So the question there is, have you compared, or have you got the average gender pay gap for the local government sector in New Zealand as opposed to New Zealand in general?
Oh, that's a really good question, actually, and I don't have that. It's actually really challenging to get comparative statistics at the moment. We used to participate in a PwC survey where we had a lot of local government information. They no longer run those surveys, so it's been a real challenge to get benchmarking information. So that's the first part of your question. It would be good to have that information, because I think a lot of local government agencies and councils would be in a similar role. We tend to have a lot of customer-facing activities which tend to attract more females into those roles, and they tend to be lower paying within the organisation. So that's probably the major driver of the gender pay gap for us. Not so much about the dominance of particularly a male population within infrastructure. As you can see by our gender demographics, we've got a really good split across the whole organisation. It's pretty much 50-50.
And just follow up on that. I mean, in terms of staff turnover, you've talked about customer services, and we even see it within governance services, quite a large turnover in staff. So I'm assuming that when we employ new people, they come in at a lower starting rate, and then as opposed to people who've been here long term, maybe building up to higher echelons in the pay brackets.
Yeah, it really does depend on the knowledge, skills and attributes that those individuals bring to the organisation. So we're always really open to bringing in potentially younger, less experienced people and developing them. There's real benefit to do that, because you're actually teaching them in your systems and processes and coaching them. So you get great outcomes that way. But at times we're really looking for significantly experienced people to come in, lead teams, groups, hit the ground running, and we will remunerate them at the general market rate from a competitive perspective.
Yeah. Just one last one. And you might already be in the report, but what is the percentage? Have we got a percentage within the different groups within council, the different employment categories like corporate services versus infrastructure? So is there a breakdown of percentage of staff within each group?
Yeah, we can infinitely break it down. It's all pretty manual and spreadsheets and things like that. So we do try to balance the meaningfulness of the information versus the effort required to get that information out. We haven't quite implemented the fancy systems like Workday, which are coming, which make reporting on these kind of statistics really easy. And that'll be at people's fingertips, but we're not quite there yet. So at this stage, we don't break it down to activity and group and teams, but we can. It just means more time and resource doing that, which is pretty resource hungry activity when we're doing these types of reporting.
Can I just finally, just occurred to me, the infrastructure group, the high number of people, and I've heard this at Tauranga City as well, there's a whole raft of experienced people in that infrastructure group that are nearing retirement. Have we got a active policy to, like you say, bring on the new people to be mentored by these old people before they exit the system?
Yeah, we do. I think there's more to do in that space. So one of the things that I've previously done is that you tend to bring in younger graduates to shadow people, but we're in an environment where that might not be the right solution for us at this time. So increasing headcount temporarily to manage those gaps is one solution. That might not be the most appealing option for council at the moment. So we have to look at different ways to do that. One is really key in terms of making sure that we are capturing that information, documenting key processes when we know that we have a risk because there's a single individual within the organisation with all the institutional knowledge. We need to identify that and start having those people working closely with other team members to share that knowledge. It's not an uncommon situation to be in. Particularly for this sized organisation as well. I've worked in a number of different organisations, thousands of employees down to this one, 330 employees. There are a lot of really, really important individual contributors that hold significant strategic positions in this organisation, and that's going to be a challenge that we continue to have. I'm up here today with my name on quite a few of these reports because the risk and assurance manager and their family decided to go to Australia. That's an example of that. We're resourced for relatively high maturity across our organisation. What I mean by that, we have a large number of individual strategic contributors. The way that they get their work done is by collaborating really, really extensively across the organisation and imparting their knowledge and expertise to build capability across the organisation. We're not of a size where we have pockets of teams that lead out and deliver these activities on behalf of the organisation. It's a real balancing act, to be fair, when you're in we know we're small. I know we're called medium, but in effect, this is a relatively small organisation that's experiencing significant growing pains. Oh, they're all busy. There's no doubt about that.
Another question.
Thank you, sir. Yes. Now, my other one is annual leave balances, etc. And that, of course, to a lot of businesses is an area that they just never think about, of course, little individual businesses and then the exposure. So that concerns me financially, I guess. And you're probably more the person that's putting in the report, not really the person that controls this one much.
Yep.
So I won't shoot the messenger. But I do look at it as a fairly major risk to us at present with what I'm reading there, in particular in regulatory services, that there's a large number over that whole report of those people owed quite a few days of holiday pay. And so not only is it the financial risk, which I would normally look at for little businesses, but for here, it touches on what you just spoke about, which is if some of these people start going off on holiday all at once, how do we manage this? Or are you in a position to answer how we're going to reduce some of this exposure of days? And are you in a position, or who can answer how we reduce that risk and get those used?
Yeah, so overall, the statistics have been trending down. We've been pretty proactive in the way that we've been approaching this and managing the outstanding leave balances. As you know, it is a liability that shows up in the financials at the end of the year in the annual report. So we've been quite proactive about reducing that over this year, and we'll continue to do that. The best way that you approach it is you have upfront conversations and you plan for a longer period of time. You put in a leave management plan for 12 months at a time. You start working with your individuals who have those high leave balances. So there's lots of things that we can do. But again, for some individuals who, like I say, they're really important people to the organisation, they often feel like they can't have a holiday. And so we need to be really, really conscious of that and ensuring that people can take the right leave because it's really important for their well-being. So we've got to, again, it's never easy, particularly for this size organisation. And I'll sit here having, a good 30 years of experience in this space now. And when we're moving into an environment where we are very, very conscious around headcount and resources, these challenges and these unintended consequences can exacerbate. So we need to be really, really mindful about that.
And just a further comment to add to Darren's, we made a very conscious effort post-Christmas that we wanted all staff to return with no more than 15 days outstanding leave. So where possible, we're trying to get that down right across the board. And we get the information through to the management team once a week to make sure that we've got leave plans for any of our high number of people who are carrying high days. And as to Darren's point, then how do we manage that across the organisation? So very mindful of this and something that is in particular is the wellbeing of our staff as well.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Scrooge.
Yes, I just wanted to ask about a contract incident mentioned on page 19. I appreciate it's not a direct council employee, but it concerned me the description of this trying to seal road with not properly stabilised underneath. Talks about the road edge collapsing. It really bothers me that we're trying to put tar seal on something that hasn't been properly consolidated first. And it also talks about staff having been trained to new processes. Well, that's great. I would have thought that operating vehicles with a high centre of gravity on sloping ground is something that's been learnt many times in the past. And so it bothers me that fact as well.
Yep, that bothers us, and that's why we put in it. The nature of the event, it wasn't that the ground wasn't consolidated, it was just right on that lower edge where it becomes a bit softer naturally. But yes, with the tail being up, centre of gravity being raised and on a camber as well, it heightened the risk of that activity. And so that was something that from a training perspective, it's more we need a directive from you, Mr. Contractor, that when you're doing that sort of cambered work, it's ideally probably not with a heavy machinery that requires a tail lift up, more of a manual process. Correct.
Member Henderson.
Well, thanks, Murray. Darren, thanks. Statistically, you're looking pretty good on turnover. 9.3. It's well below the sector average, which is about 16 for local government. So that's the step back and look, and that's that's really good. What's your gut feel going forward, especially with regard to 3 water separation? How we're going to manage that turnover, especially the poaching of the best people, because separation is going to be localised in the sense that there'll be, and there's no doubt that there will be a grab for the best, and with its own budget. Your gut feel around all that in terms of where you see that trend potentially going in terms of turnover?
Yeah, it's a really, it will be an interesting time. I don't actually have a really strong gut feel about how that's going to play out.
No.
I do think that there are always opportunities for outstanding employees to seek alternative employment. Good people still in tight markets have plenty of options. And so the best way that we can mitigate against that is provide the right conditions here and be the best employee that we can do. And we do our best, we continue to punch above our weight in terms of the kind of environment that we create, the culture that we create within the organization. And we need to continue to do that to ensure that that our good people want to be with us, and that's where they see their future. But in saying that too, we've got to be open to supporting growth and development, and there are limited opportunities for individuals who effectively come here, learn great skills and develop a great experience. There's not always that opportunity for them at that next level. And so it's natural for there to be a bit of healthy turnover within the organisation. So I don't get concerned about that. It's in those situations you got to send someone off, adorn the bird with feathers so it can fly, and hopefully they return one day and take in a different position. So it's a bit of a tricky one. It really, for the waters and the impact of the waters, it depends what kind of model we end up standing up and how attractive that might be to employees, I think.
And through the chair, just to add to Darren's final comment there, because council have made the decision last week in terms of going to a multi-CCO, one of the things that were important was to look after the staff through that process, and by going sooner rather than later gives our staff certainty. So we've been very clear and with our communication with our staff about where we're at in terms of that process, so that they know how we're tracking when the decision is going to be made, so that we can keep them with us in terms of their understanding of where they're at and what it means to them. But one of the things that we thought was going to be the potential risk was if we were to wait in terms of when we're going to establish a CCO, and so we'd like to do that as soon as possible.
Right. Any other questions for Darren and Clint? No, do you want to?
I was just going to summarise the health and safety piece
Very
quickly.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back. Nice to see you all. So overall, from a health, safety and wellbeing perspective, we had a pleasing performance during that quarter. Low severity of events and numbers of events to our own staff. Obviously, a couple of contractor ones, which worried us as well, which is why they're included in this report. But we did have a continued increase in proactive checks and inspections by our staff. But from my perspective, more of our staff doing more of those checks. So we're widening who was out there completing them. So we're heading in the right direction. We are focusing on the right areas. That is remaining accurate, the areas we're focusing on, but our staff's capability is increasing as we're moving through that process. So our overall maturity is increasing at the same time. But other than that, if there's any questions further than the contractor one, feel free.
I'd just like to know the aggressive interaction that our staff have to cope with. Which sections are really where they're most vulnerable, and what support do we give them?
The majority, there's no specific area where they're most at risk, but we do find there's a few in our book library in the AA area, and that's primarily because people aren't aware of what the AA's requirements are, not what we require of the people, but they're coming in and AA say we need this license or that copy of that license, not a photocopy, but the original. We have to pass that on, and we can't bend those rules. We have to stay by them. So that's a factor in some of them. And in fact, this most recent quarter that we're highlighting here, we had an online one through our chatbot as well. So someone through that method was being quite abusive and aggressive through that. It's only words, but it still affects our people.
Do you have any problems with people with dogs?
Out in the community? We do, but the guys are really good at their de-escalation training. They're really good at managing that. We go up to where we're known to a known aggressive or potentially abusive customer, but the team are really good at identifying and then de-escalating those situations. So we don't get a lot reported through here because they nip it in the bud at source.
It's true that on occasions the police have to go with the dog ranger?
On occasion, where we deem that the risk is too high for our people, then we'll put a safety plan in place and the police will accompany us to protect our people.
Councillor Valley.
Yeah, just on that question, I've just been approached by a local in Te Puke who's had ongoing issues with wandering dogs in the central Te Puke. And just the question about response time, really, I guess, if you get a call, what's the average response time from getting a call to maybe how quickly you respond to that? Like if someone believes that their livestock, for example, is in danger by a wandering dog, what is it possible to respond like within a very short period of time or not?
We'll leave that one for
Alison.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the response to dog complaints varies depending on the type of service request that comes through. So we have got obviously high priority roles, responsibilities in relation to attacks. And the key thing for us is obviously firstly addressing harm or potential harm to individuals. And then secondly, harm to other animals and to property. So in terms of us being able to respond or give an average time, it would depend on the type of complaint and obviously whether it's within normal working hours, outside of normal working hours, and the availability of officers. So we endeavour to get to those higher priority complaints as soon as possible, and they will be definitely same day, but it will depend on what availability of officers and obviously the how far away they are from that site at the time.
I don't want to draw this out too long, but just for since we've got the question on the table, do we have dog rangers located in our main centres, or do they have to travel across district? Like, for example, do we have one in Te Puke? Is there does it depend on what time of the day that like a complaint comes in at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and it's likely to be dark by the time the ranger gets there? Would that still occur, or would it be deferred to the next day?
We do not have specific officers allocated to specific areas as part of normal operating procedure. They will generally tend to operate in areas, but if we've got for example, an attack and we think that there will need to be 2 officers required on site, it will be bringing 2 officers from across the district. So we have got 4 field officers and subject to leave and availability, it will take longer for attendance for some jobs than others.
Is there a daylight condition?
Take this one up morning tea.
Yeah.
All right. That case, then we will call for a mover and a seconder to receive the People and Capability Manager's report. Thank you, Councillor Sol. Councillor Murray Benj. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And we'll break for morning tea. Thank you, Darren and Clint. And we'll break for morning tea and back at 25 to 12. What you? We're all live, we ready to? We're live. Okay, we're all live again. Yes, right. So we need to return to 10.2 for the item that was left to lie on the table. And we have some wording here, which I will read to you. Right, so the wording that has been agreed by all involved is that the chair of Audit, Risk and Finance Committee writes to DIA advising that the statutory deadline of 31 October 2025 for the adoption of the 2024-25 annual report is unlikely to be met because although the annual report is estimated to be ready before the deadline, Audit New Zealand and management advise that the final audited annual report will not be available until after the local government elections, so will be unable to be formally adopted by the current council. So that's
definitely what I seconded.
So that's the final wording. So you're okay with that, Mover? And you're okay with that, Madam Seconder? Right. So any debate on? There being no debates, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Right. Then we're on to 10.3, the outstanding recommendations register. I think that's Darren, is it? Is it Darren?
I'll just start. So through the chair. So this tracks mainly through our various audits across council and over time keeps an eye on our register of how we're going in addressing those recommendations. You'll note that we have received from Audit New Zealand today the management letter to the end of June last year. That those recommendations have now been included in this particular report as well. So some of them are just new. So just wanted to highlight that it is, that's why we've had the adoption of the audit report first before going through into the recommendations. But the good news is we've closed a lot out. So I'll hand over to the team.
Yeah, so you'll see the repetition of some of these things that were read in the previous report.
Yeah, I think there was a good summary from Adele about where we're at. I think we've removed some 16 outstanding recommendations have been resolved and removed, and we've updated the current register, like Adele said, with the latest Audit New Zealand report. So we're open to questions from the floor with regard to the current report.
So Councillor Joyce, you want to pick up your earlier?
There's actually a couple in there, but the ozone one is interesting. So one way other organisations do it is they don't have generic accounts. They have it pinged to a person in that other organisation, right? So that person may not be the one that logs in, but they are responsible for it. I just suggest that as an alternative version of generic accounts, which you can lose control of, right? We've been told by the auditors that they don't like them, and we're sort of saying, well, no, we like them. And I just think there's a middle path there where, rather than using generic, they are actually owned by somebody, even if that person doesn't always use them to log in. They are responsible for them. And that's a much clearer system of accountability. That's more in line with what Audit New Zealand is suggesting.
Through the chair, and we are constrained by our current system at the moment, and it is, as we've noted, a very, very old system, which is not based on good practice. And so we certainly acknowledge that, and where we can, we have got those processes in place. So
turn it off is the answer.
yeah, that's right, turn it off. But we do try and make sure that the controls are still there, because obviously that's not ideal, but most people who are with the organisation do have their own user. So where we've got this, it's only for a scenario and it doesn't happen very often. So we feel that we're comfortable with it.
I fully understand you don't want to upgrade a system that's going out the door shortly. The second one was on page 68 of the agenda. there's a typo, just to take on Murray's role as sub-editor. All sensitive expenditure should have on-up approval. It should be one-up approval. But I thought we'd already dealt with this, and yet it says we're still going to be resolved. Yeah, we already had a long discussion about this, and yet it says it's still to be resolved. So the sensitive expenditure policy dealt with this months ago. I'm just confused.
Through the chair. So yes, it has been resolved, but it needs to be signed out by the auditors as well. So we've got it still as pending, but the controls are there.
Right. Any other questions then on the outstanding register? But it's good to see somebody in squared away. Excellent. All right. Okay. Excellent. So call for a mover and a seconder that the People and Capability Managers Report titled Outstanding Recommendations Register May 2025 be received. Thank you, Councillor Thwaites. Councillor Murray-Benge, all those in favour? Against? Carried. And over to Jonathan, who's already sitting there for page 72.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this report is presenting the April financials. This is a follow-on from the Q3 financials that were presented to Council last week. The aim on presenting monthly rather than just the quarterly snapshot is to provide an increased frequency of information up to Council and to providing this report to AF today to do so. So the 10 months to April continues to show revenue being higher than budget at 159 versus the budget of 155. The main reasons for that are our fees and charges being higher, our interest revenue being higher, and our vested assets, which we don't budget for, being at 4.4 million. Expenses are also continued to be lower than budget for the 10 months to April at 118.8 versus 121 million, so being 2.3 million lower. And that's a result of continued close monitoring through our tight fiscal environment, and in particular noting the personnel cost savings of 1.2 million there. Overall surplus is 40.8 million versus budgeted 34.7, but as noted last week, that's not the rates picture as such, but the full picture, which includes some non-cash items in that surplus. Our rates fund items continue to be tightly monitored, and as we move towards our year-end position and closing that through our accruals process, a large part of that to confirm the position, and as previously talked about earlier as well, our work in progress reconciliations will form part of that too. Our debt position at 30th of April is 160 million drawn all through the LGFA against a full year budget of 179 million. And that's with a debt to revenue ratio of 90% against, again, the year-end position of just over that 100% mark. Capital spend of 94 million year to date April, with expected May of 19 million spend and June of 24 million spend, targets towards the June 138 million June position forecast against the 161 full year budget, which is around the 86% achievement. There's also a treasury report in there at the end of the report, which shows our positions for our hedging. We've made some good gains in that space, and with the guidance of Bancorp, continue to target those two small breaches, particularly in the year 2 to 8 window, which range from 8 to 28 million of that breach range of unhedged borrowing. I'm happy to take any questions on these April financials. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at page 73. Sorry. Yep, 73. And about the capital expenditure and where we're tracking with that. So as of end of April, it says 58.2% spent on CapEx. I had understood we're up to very near 100, but it's looking like 90% completion rate. But even that, trying to get 32% in the last month or so is seems ambitious. But perhaps you can comment on where we're tracking with that, given that we've literally got like 3 or 4 weeks left to go of the year.
Yeah, so at the moment we're working through what the May month close looks like in terms of that spend. The forecasted for May, which we've got from the infrastructure team, was 19 million of actual spend. And then again for June, 24 million of actual spend. So at this stage, we're forecasting that spent position to be 138 million of the 161 budgeted. So there's some interpretation of spend versus commitment in some of the numbers, but the actual spend we're looking at is the 138 million.
There's some big bills that came in last month and expect in the next few weeks.
Yes, there are.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just trying to reconcile the rather good saving in personnel costs with the personnel report we received earlier. So it's great that we're running nearly 1.3 million below budget, but FTEs have not gone down. So is that because we're basically held open vacancies rather than disestablished positions? It might be a question more for the CEO, to be fair, or Adele, because it just seems to me that holding open positions is a short-term saving, but if we want to save money long-term, we actually have to disestablish some positions. And I understand there's a difference between FTE approved and bums on seats, right? And that can explain the difference short-term, but I want to know what the long-term direction is, please.
Aaron.
Thank you, through the chair. Look, the current budgets have all this year's approved FTE as they were approved at that level. So our opening position is the one that we want to be focused on 1 July, where we've actually disestablished 11 positions moving forward. So those are still currently reported in the FTE number that you see, and that's where the anomaly sits. So you've got to start looking at that longer term position. So we have effectively disestablished those positions, and we'll not carrying those forward to next year, along with other savings that we've identified, which I can take you through those at any time you want.
So what would, taking those 11 off, what would be our FTE number for 1st July projected, please?
Uh, 331.7. That's the approved FTE.
So looking at the numbers, the financial numbers, which is what the public really care about, is we're at 1.3 million savings, or near enough, and that's largely been sort of done over the last few months, right? It's because we weren't on this program until recently. So how much of, and it may be a question too hard to answer today, but how much of that is due to positions held as opposed to positions we plan to disestablish? Because positions held is not a long-term saving.
Through the chair. So there is a combination happening at the moment. So where those positions were disestablished in the current year, that flows through into the next financial year, which is the roles that Darren's just been talking to. Where appropriate, we have been holding on to vacancies or considering their future. And we, as Darren's even spoken about, we have a meeting of our ELT to determine whether or not that position is going to go forward or not. And so some positions have been held for the purposes of also recouping for our savings requirement in year to fund our rates deficit from last year. So we've got both happening in combination at the moment.
So will that, once it's been, some of these positions have been through ELT, will that get reported back to council between now and the end of triennium? I mean, this is the last Audit and Risk Committee meeting. I'm acutely aware of this, and some of these things we're trying to achieve, need to be reported back to the public as well. And then the second part of that question is, have we got a mechanism in the absence of an Audit and Finance Committee meeting to report the main numbers? I'm very happy to have monthly numbers, by the way. I'm very appreciative, but do we need another Audit and Risk Committee meeting, or do we need some other way of bringing it to council?
So it's through the annual plan process that you're obviously setting the budgets for next financial year, and we have been talking about what those adjustments were in terms of total headcount and savings that we're looking to identify through that process. The rest becomes an operational issue with the Chief Executive.
And the main numbers, how are we going to see those? Or how's the public going to see those, more importantly?
sorry, the May, end of May results.
Yes, exactly, because we haven't got another audit and risk. committee.
We'll be putting any other further information back through council, as we noted before, to make sure we get the regular reporting.
Councillor Murray Bench.
Could I ask, the 1.5% increase on our rate demand is, what influence are we having on that? When our CEO was appointed and was highlighted that we had serious issues in our finances and highlighted that 1.5% would go on to our rate demand. And what are we doing to actually haul that back, can I ask?
No, just commenting, Councillor Murray Bench, that has been the discussion of the annual plan for 25-26, and we will be coming back to you, but you've agreed in principle in terms of that contribution to the savings, which was in addition to the 7.4 something % rate increase to take it up to just under 9, but that's part of the annual plan approval process, which we've been workshopping up until now. So it's in train, as well as the other savings, which include personnel savings and others that we've been working through in the last couple of months.
Anything that we can do to haul that increase back for this financial year would be really valued by the community.
In terms of this financial year, we're still looking at achieving a small surplus, so we're not expecting a deficit for this year. The annual plan, those savings are incorporated into the annual plan for 25-26 going forward.
We increase our debt level.
Yes, but that's to do with capital investment and infrastructure, which the council's been on a large capital investment program. So that's good debt in terms of funding it intergenerationally.
Right. Oh, do you have a question?
Yes, I've got quite a few. Now, I was wondering, Murray, last week I sent a few messages around in relation to trying to get a good feeling towards what all this means and step back. How are we running compared to LTP? What changes have happened to date? And the assumptions around those in terms of changes to the big numbers. And I'm talking the summary of what you tell the public in terms of the LTP. And often it's the operating deficit or operating surplus that is the changing number of most interest. Now, I was unsure. I thought it was going to be tabled today. Apparently not, but it's a one-pager that's been prepared by management that looks at stepping back at the revised budget, takes into consideration the revisions as per your draft annual plan, but it importantly shows what that's going to look like for the 25-26 year, all things being as is currently known by management. So in saying that, we're not trying to second guess Three Waters, et cetera, et cetera. It's what is right now, here and now. Now, that was a really good one-pager that I received. And I thought it was going to be tabled here now, because I think it's exactly what this committee needs to be seeing, because it puts context on everything else in terms of the detail. Otherwise, the detail, I don't know what it means. To be perfectly frank, I don't know what that means to the impact to our LTP, which is the only document your public have to go by. Now, on these numbers, I understand that the 24-25 LTP had and that number now has been indicated by management as being, this is about as good as we reckon will be for this year, is going to be 46. I'm right? That's what the numbers are saying. Jonathan.
Yeah, so those are the numbers that we drafted up with you yesterday. Correct.
Yep. Now, on those same on the numbers that you drafted up, and we discussed, and I was very happy with those numbers, by the way, and what you did and the assumptions you'd made. It indicates that for the 25-26 year, bear in mind your current LTP is indicating that the surplus is for that period is going to be 64.8 million. So those are the numbers you've published. Based on the spreadsheet that we got yesterday, those numbers are looking like they'll be 36.9. Now, this is what I really want this committee to be seeing these numbers. This is our last committee meeting before and it allows you to make strategic decisions, because I've got a whole lot of questions around Treasury, especially, for example, around the strategy of Bancorp's got on interest rate risk management, because they're working off forecast and reforecast debt numbers, which they need to be doing. Well, we need to know those numbers too, and this is what I've asked for. I think it's a one-pager that is extremely easy to see, folks. And can I please ask that this be tabled now, here and now?
We can circulate that around to everyone now and have a look at that. And you can talk it through, Stu. Yeah.
It's because I need to be able to talk to it.
Sure.
When I'm making questions around, for example, what is the strategy around this council's interest rate risk? What is the strategy? It's not about the hindsight. We're going to meet policy because that's what Bancorp are doing, is to ensure we don't breach policy. But what's the strategy?
The only thing I would comment, though, it assumes it hasn't done any calculation on waters, so it assumes our LTP, no changes.
And that's exactly what I asked for and recommended for. It's about changing the numbers we know, and the changes that you know and you expect to be always being updated, especially around capex spend, debt, ongoing debt forecast. So look, I think that it would be, for me, it would be really helpful if you had that one pager. I think it's really helpful for you. It'll be helpful for me to be able to put in context the questions I'll have on other parts of the report.
Yep, just noting that has been circulated and uploaded to Stella now for conversation.
Chair, given Stu's mentioned the one page, and I love a one pager, I'm just asking, can we get a physical copy of that printed out rather than go from screen to screen to screen while Stu's talking? Is it possible to get 12 copies of that made? Relatively, surely can't take too long to print out.
I think the best thing, because it is only a one pager, you could put up on the screen. It would be easy to read. Yep. That's the easiest.
Where will we find it if it's in our system? Is it in this?
But given the state of two waters and then the potential of what's going to happen for stormwater, the LTP figures are so far skew, and trying to make reference to them, it almost needs an amendment to the LTP to get some relevance going forward.
And I can probably comment on that, Councillor Thwaite. So you are right. The moment that council makes a decision to go to a council-controlled organisation, we will be required to do a long-term plan amendment. It will need to be audited, but we won't need to consult on it because we have met our obligations under the current Water Services Bill and the Enablement Acts. So what we do know is that the debt will transfer to the new organisation. We are very cognizant of what we're doing and to Stuart's point, are looking ahead in the next 3 years, but there are a lot of things that are changing at the moment in terms of the business, in terms of how things are operating under the existing LTP. But I'll leave Stuart to raise the questions and then we can respond to any other comments that councillors may have.
If we, is it going up on the screen? Thank you. Great. So
can we just get what's changed? So the first section is LTP, second section is a reforecast.
Yeah, let me, if it's all, if I could bear your indulgence, folks. Is that a Murray? Would you mind if I explain this, give it some context? Also, absolutely put all the assumption writers to Miriam's point. There's some things that we're just not going to reforecast. The top is what you have already put into your LTP. That is a snapshot that is in front of your public. That is what you've said. That's just a cut and paste, essentially, of your LTP, the top grey. And that surplus deficit for period at the end is kind of when we talk about cause effect and everything from rating increases to payments for the operating revenue, any potential likelihood of deficits, that's where it's going to get captured. So the reforecast impact to that LTP and your annual plan. Oh, can I? Yep. So really, we're taking those same headings. So total operating revenue, the total borrowings. Now I've put in there that total borrowings is a good figure to know because that will match at the bottom of this. You'll see what the debt forecast is looking like. The finance costs, which is really important because as you can see, it does become quite a major impactor. And the total operating expenses, then we look to see, well, what's that result? Now, I don't expect to see too much in that 26, 27 onwards, because we're not trying to reinvent anything on the operating revenue. Certainly, if there's been some expenditure savings that management are telling you that are evident now, it'd be nice to see those translate through, because to your point, Rodney, is this just a timing difference or have we actually made some progress? To your points raised about FTEs, et cetera, et cetera. But that kind of forecasting doesn't really get done until you do your annual plan. So a lot of that's going to be contained within the recently approved draft annual plan. And that's going to...
Mr. We have a question on that. I'm still not clear. Is this cash flow or is this, because there's no heading on it, right? So these are cash items or these are non-cash as well?
I'm not interested in non-cash items.
Okay. So it's cash flow. It's cash flow.
Absolutely. It is operating.
Right.
Okay. It's not the below the line. We're not looking at...
Because there's no heading on it, so it's really hard to tell.
Oh, no. So that was, and that's a, yeah, it's a,
as long as we're clear.
That needs to be tuned. What I'm looking at is that it was my recommendation that we have this for every single meeting and in the report, this one pager, because it gives you you can see what everything means in the detail. So when management are giving you well, we've made these inroads, we've had this little hiccup here on this item. Well, what's the sum of all the parts? This is the sum of all the parts. And it's transparent. And it gives you the answer to the question, which is, as we're tracking right now, without thinking about Three Waters, but we're tracking right now based on your annual plan draft and the updating by management of your debt forecast, the updating of your finance costs, which should always be done on a monthly basis because of the way that they work. What's this mean to what we're looking like relative to what we said in our LTP? Simple as that. So you can ask the question, hey, we're seeing a 34.9 million surplus now. We were last year when we did the LTP, where we were looking at 64. So how are we bridging the gap? And is that going to have a potential consequence to ratepayers, or are we happy with that? It's big picture stuff. But this is what so coming back to now why I wanted to talk to this, folks, is that I have a question on the Treasury report. And in the Treasury report, there's the discussion about breaches on interest rate. And, you know, you're all thinking, well, what the heck does this mean? I mean, so what? We're getting our hindsight breach fixed. What's the strategy? We know through hell and high water, there's going to continue to be some core debt in this organisation. What's the strategy around stabilising our finance costs? Is there a strategy? What is it? And I would be asking your advisors for that strategy. Can you please give us a recommendation? Is there a level where we should be locking in some long-term cost through swaps? If so, at what level? What impact will that have to this? Because at the moment, the finance costs assume your updated debt forecast, and they assume certain things around interest rates that the market is telling you, not somebody's forecast, and what your cost of funds as a margin, what you have to pay the LGFA for your money is, which we know. So that is able to be updated monthly without any problem whatsoever. And that's going to give us some idea of what those finance costs are going to look like in the future. Now, there should be a strategy coming to this committee, a Treasury strategy about what's the plan? What is the plan? We know we're in volatile financial market conditions. Always, you know, we always will be in the tail end of the world here. But we need to know what the plan is. And I think you need to know what the plan is. So my question is, please, what is the strategy that, if we don't have one, can we have one, please, from Bancorp to give this committee a strategy as to what this council should be doing in relation to its forecast debt? You know, you're not going to get rid of it all. There's always going to be a baseline figure, but at the moment, you've got no cover beyond 5 years. Now, I've got another question, which is...
Well, can we answer that one first from Jonathan?
Yes, so to answer that through you, Mr. Chair, so on a monthly basis, we meet with Bancorp and we're looking at the transactional loans in particular that are rolling off and through that period. As they do, we will contact Bancorp to look at whether it's best to go fixed or floating through that period. During the April month, we had 25 million, which was due to roll over. 15 of that was put onto a fixed rate because we saw the opportunity, and with Bancorp's advice, that it was underneath our 4.16 annual plan assumption. So we locked in 15 of that at fixed at that point. So the strategy at the moment with the volatility in the markets is to look at transaction by transaction and making the most of that to make sure in that short term we're not in breach of our minimums in the policy.
But you're only telling me that you're managing to the breach. I'm talking about, what about, I mean, the breach is a breach. What's the future looking like? Is there a point where, and what is that level? What is the strategy about looking forward and actually proactively managing your exposures? Because everything you're saying to me at the moment, Jonathan, is hindsight.
Yep. So our target rate that we talked through with Bancorp at the moment is that 4.16, including margin, and the 4.16 is what our annual plan assumption is. So if we can get anything at or under that, then we're certainly locked in those fixed rates as that opportunity. In terms of looking further forward, we've had previous discussions with council that we're not going to look too far into the future until we get some certainty around what waters looks like, as a majority of our debt belongs to that waters bucket.
Yes, except that we've got none of our debt beyond 5 years with any certainty whatsoever, not even in funding. And that brings me to the look, finance costs are a tale of two cities. It's how much does it cost me in margin to borrow, which I go to the LGFA to get, and I know what that margin is. And at the moment, you have a weighted average margin, it might be around, for example, 80 basis points. But we know what that is, and we can, to some degree, predict what it will be with a degree of relative certainty. What we don't know is what the underlying interest rate is going to be, which you can determine occasionally, if you decide, yes, I quite like where the 10-year swap rate is. It's currently at 4%, and that's a good level, or 3.5%. Now, I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to make a judgment on that. That's what our advisor should be telling us. But you are going to have that debt. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I do not like the debt profile of this council, in that it is too short. My personal opinion, for an intergenerational organisation with intergenerational debt, the average life of our debt is, I think, is at 2.65 years. That's practically working capital. I'm sorry. And I am yet to see a sound strategy from our advisors as to why that would be being recommended to this organisation. I'd really like to know what's behind it, what's the strategy. I think that's very short. Now, that's funding. If we look at our interest rate risk management, it's even shorter.
Question from Don on that. Unless Stu, I'm not making a question, I'm just making a statement. I hear what Stu's concerns are, but to certainly push the red button at the last meeting of the audit risk of this term seems a bit rich. Not rich, I mean, but it seems out of kilter where we've been for the last 5 years with the whole uncertainty of waters. I see that amendment that Adele foreshadowed next year by the incoming council, whoever they are, and they should take sound learning advice from Stuart's advice. But really, next year's amended LTP annual plan is going to look so much different. And then the 27-28 is going to be so different that this intergenerational forecast going forward, Stuart talks about, is the time for it then. So I'm all for hearing what you say, but I have confidence in what Jonathan's saying, that it's being managed at the moment.
Agree with that.
And we are in a period of declining interest rates at the moment. We are going the right way. So,
oh, gee, I'm sorry. Please don't get me started on that.
Well, no one knows what it's going to be in 27-28. That's what I'm saying.
That is exactly my point.
Exactly, but it won't be anything like those numbers there, that's for sure.
Councillor Joyce. A couple of things. It's a very good point. Yeah, we haven't matched our debt to the actual loans. And one of the questions I have for Stuart is, does that reflect the fact we have been in a falling market? Yeah, and I think the general view is that the falling market is over. So that perhaps makes us a bit more urgent, because if the economy does recover, then, and over time, the longer the tail will go up, we'll go from an inverted curve presumably to a more normal curve, in which case, waiting could be expensive. So I'd be interested to hear the view on, and I know forecasting interest rates is a mug's game, but we are in a situation now where we seem to be near the bottom, going on the way that the debt curve is looking at the moment. And the second part of this, I'm not too worried about the water stuff, because if we do a good job, whoever's running that next, be it any of the three options we're looking at, because we haven't decided yet, finally, that debt will be novated to them. So we need to manage it as best we can for our ratepayers, whether they end up being a part of this council or part of a CCO. So we can't wait to take this discussion, because we need to get the best deal for our ratepayers based on where the experts, and it's not me, see interest rates going. And we should have a goal of better matching our exposure to our loan length. 2.65 is a very short number when you've got loans that, for assets that are 50-year assets.
Councillor Murray.
I'm listening to the debate and I can't hear the answer to what Stuart is asking. And to drop it all off to the Three Waters CCO, we haven't finally decided that. And if you have read the stormwater issue, it makes me really, really nervous. And so we can only look at the questions as we are today, not how we're flipping off something to some CCO, because that really just hides the issue completely, in my view. So are you finding the answers there, Stuart?
Can we have a comment from Marie?
My understanding is our infrastructure loans are matched individually against the infrastructure that was built, and the basis for our targeted rate, and also for our FinCo calculation. So the infrastructure loans on internal debt are matched to the life of those loans, generally about 25 years. So all our internal debt of any substances has a general life of about that 25 to 30 years. Is that correct? Yeah. Our external debt is managed globally. So this is what you're looking at, Stu. So this is our external debt. So I'm not sure exactly how we're doing it now, but that is our whole debt portfolio managed, as you've said, with Bancorp, Jonathan, based on current cost of funds and cost of capital, and where you're able to secure lower interest rates. And then that is applied to the internal loans every year as an adjustment. And then those loans are recalculated intergenerationally. So I feel like we are matching our loans to the infrastructure, but our external debt management, I mean, I'm open to comment on that about how we've been doing it, but it's managed globally on the market rates that we can obtain. And if we can get under, we're always trying to achieve under or take out swaps that give us that advantage. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's our current approach.
Yeah. So that's how I understand things are operating. So is that wrong?
Okay, to that point, we don't know what that is. I don't know what that is.
So that's the issue that you have, Stu.
First time I've heard that, hey, if we can get 4.16, we're going to lock some of that in. But what does that mean? How much? How far? Now, again, I'm sorry, but there's two big misunderstandings going on around this table right now. Debt management is two things. There is the debt itself, which is the liquidity of knowing that you've got access to that money at a price that is committed to a period. And then there's underlying that, there's interest rate risk management. So that, for example, when we talk about your debt profile out there in the market of 2.6 years, that is your access to money committed, not the underlying interest rate risk management of it, but getting it from LGFA. Do I get it from LGFA on a floating rate basis for 10 years, or do I get it for 8 years? I know that I can get it for that period, and I've got that money and it's funding my assets.
Yeah, so,
But
yeah.
they're two different things. And yes, right now, if we're talking about the market and market rates coming off and maybe have they bottomed, that's interest rate risk management. That's not funding risk management. That doesn't tell you that when we had a COVID liquidity crisis looming and you couldn't borrow money for more than 200 basis points over government because there's a liquidity crisis around the world or there is a credit crunch, that's funding. You guys have both very short term. Both. My question is, can I please see the strategy? It's very simple. Can Bancorp please provide us with the strategy? And do they think that is prudent? Is that prudent for a public benefit organisation of the size of Western Bay Plenty District Council with intergenerational assets and intergenerational commitments to the public? Please tell us. I'm not criticising, I am asking the question, please.
Stuart, and through you, Mr. Chair, just to that point, I'm happy to go away and develop a formal strategy with Bancorp and with your support and work through what the loan book timeframes could be versus that interest rate risk management as well. So we can split those two pieces and come back with a more accurate, formalised strategy. Happy to work with you on that.
Liquidity risk, funding risk, interest rate risk, please. Thank you very much. I'll be, if everybody's happy with that, I would be really happy to see that.
Can I just raise a question? Because I thought that's what we did. I thought we've always done that. So we need to refer to our financial strategy because it will have what we're meant to be doing, because we have to have a financial strategy. So Stu, I thought that's what we were doing. So I think it's important that we come back with what our existing LTP financial strategy is, because I would expect or hope that all of that's been covered in the strategy and is reflected in how Bancorp interacts. I don't know, but it should reflect what our strategy says. Yep.
Yeah, that's correct, Miriam. That is our current approach, is to refer back to those strategies. What I was referring to is we'll formalise that with Bancorp to make sure we've got a document which highlights each of those 3 areas that Stuart's asking about.
So I can understand Stuart's confusion because there's no direct link between that detailed strategy and what we're reporting on. But I would hope that we are doing that in a professional, in the normal way, but we don't know. So that's good information to come back. But I would hope that that's been covered and it's a good strategy. I can't comment. I haven't seen it recently.
So just through the chair, so I can absolutely say, Miriam, that we are following our Treasury policy. And so Bancorp checks in around our Treasury policy to make sure that we're compliant with that. So we do have those measures in place at the moment, which we adopt through the long-term plan.
Yeah, so I think it's important that we come back to everyone around the table and let them know what that looks like. And I think that might help Stu understand the context, because it'll help me too. I don't know where we're at with that either.
So which committee does that go back to? Have we got another audit and risk committee this term?
Through the chair, no, we don't. So we will either have a workshop if there's more information just required, and if there's any other requirements for a public discussion, we'll hold it through the council meeting.
And the information will go to our independent director on this committee as well, for him to comment.
Just my comment is I think we used to report at audit and risk every time all of those measurable things about liquidity risk and all sorts of financial and debt management risk. So it would be good if we did carry on with that.
I was just going to say, in the interest of moving things along, I'm happy to move receipt of the report if that's your wish, Mr. Chairman.
This is not so much a question, but a request. So noting that the elected members were told of the deficit of 3.5 million last year, and then subsequently we approved 4.2 million of debt funding in February. And then this was revised to a $14 million deficit in April 25. And if I recall, there's no confirmation of included reserves or current accounts. I'd like to request a report that clearly demonstrates how this occurred and how it is going to be remedied. And that this report comes back in the public agenda to council to ensure full transparency and disclosure to future elected members. I don't know what the process is, but that's the request.
Through the chair. So we're addressing a number of the items through the annual plan process. So where things happen in year in terms of a cost that we didn't have in the current budget, then we have to address it in future years. So we have been working through with council in the current year, the things that we hadn't planned within the year. So yes, we've acknowledged and put in the Q1 report, the rating deficit, which we are now tracking through to make sure that those funds will be repaid over a period of about 3 years and included in the annual plan processes. But we can come back to council with further information, but we'll probably do that through the annual plan process.
Since this relates to historic information, is the current annual plan the correct place for that to land?
Ultimately, it's about setting the rates going forward to make sure that the income meets the expenditure requirements.
This is around full transparency in regard to how we finished up in the position that we would then have to tweak the going forward. If that can come in a summary report that that the public and the future elected members will be able to see and understand.
So councillors, that's the intention with the annual plan, the next annual plan meeting, which will come back to you with the final position. We'll also provide a report about where we've been on this journey, what changes we've made, what those changes are made up of, where that gets us this year and in terms of going forward. So we can provide that report. There's no problem with that.
I'll defer to the other members if that's satisfactory, because I don't know how to weigh that up.
I think, sir, could I just comment? I think it should be formalised because Councillor Wickers has raised a substance and staff have assured us that it will come back. I think that should be formalised. Sorry?
So some of it's already been reported to us. There is no $40 million deficit from last year. It's just, yeah, but there was just some late subsidies paid because work wasn't quite done. So it fell into this year. We've been told that. So I think some of this has been canvassed at council before. If people need an assurance, and I'd support that. But yeah, some of this has gone through council meetings before. You know, work not quite done by balance date moved into the following year. You can see that in these numbers as well, because the numbers, you know, the surplus here looks sky high because some of the money came in after July the 1st, right? So that's why, in a way, you need to look at the 2 years together. But if people need an assurance, I think it's a good idea. I mean, it's presumably going to be in the pre-election update anyway, because that's where we report to the public.
So for dummies like me, I'd really appreciate if we formalise councillor Wicker's motion and then it's recorded for everybody to see. Happy to second it if he recommended something, I'll second it.
Yep, then I'd like to recommend that motion in regard to what I stated. A report that clearly demonstrates how the $14 million deficit arrived, how it occurred and how it is being remedied, and that the report comes back to council.
Thank you, Murray. Could I please move a motion that the tabled one-page summary. Oh, I do beg your pardon. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we had finished.
So maybe a question. So you're recommending to council, but if it's been coming through the annual plan committee, just in terms of what's most appropriate and convenient for bringing this forward, are we happy that it goes to long-term annual plan committee instead?
The normal process for the annual plan is when you work through the workshops that you've gone through, councillors, and then when we come to you to formalise things, which is what Councillor Murray-Benj is after, and it's only right, is we sort of explain the journey that we've come on, where we started off with, whether we went out for consultation, what our original rates projection was, then the findings and the amendments that we've made, which is what you're after, Andy. And so we include that in basically a summary of what we've done. And so we're happy to provide that in a fulsome report that comes to the annual plan committee, because that's the right place, because that's where you make your decision. And that will document all of those different items that have been raised in previous workshops. So that becomes formalised in a report and gives you a final number. And then you're asked to look in terms of the annual plan report itself about whether you're happy to set that rate based on those changes that have been made. And that would include the 1.5 million of increase in councillor rates from what was initially proposed. It would include the carried forward issue that we had on 4.2 million, plus the other issues that have been amended along the way, and the savings that council staff have been able to save. So I'd imagine that all of that information that you require will be in that report.
Yep, so that just the change from report to council to report to the annual plan committee.
I mean, we have the assurance that we're going to get that anyway in the annual.
It needs to go to the annual plan committee because it forms the basis for your decision making on setting the annual plan. Yep.
So do you still want it?
Yes, please.
Right. Okay. So that report
could I
is
ask,
going
did you still move? You were formalising it?
Yes, the only change was to move it reporting back to the annual plan committee.
Right.
Is there an annual plan committee, or are we going straight to council on the 26th?
Either or.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have time for it tomorrow. That was my thought. It's too soon. So we could take it to council, and that's where you're going to approve the annual plan anyway. So that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. It's just whatever works in terms of meeting schedules. That's my key point.
Yeah. All right. So we'll leave it with council rather than the annual plan committee. Right. So you're clear on that motion that Andy has proposed and Councillor Murray-Benj has seconded. All those in favour? No. Against? Carried. Right. So that's that one. And then Stuart wants to officially table a.
Be real brief. Look, I'd just like to move that the tabled one-page LTP comparative summary be included in the financial performance update agendas for future Audit, Risk and Finance Committee meetings, please.
And seconded by Councillor Joyce. Any discussion? All those in favour? Against, carried. Right. So we are still getting to the motion on recommendation on page 72 for that the finance manager's report dated 4th of June, financial performance update to April 30th be received. Thank you, Councillor Thwaites. Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour, all those in favour? Against, carried. All right. And Jonathan's still on the hot seat and we're going to page 87.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So the paper on page 87 is to highlight our accounting policies for the 30 June 25 annual report. So there's been some minor changes that are highlighted in this report. In particular, some updated wording to the waters reform disclosure. That's to align to progress as to where council is currently at. This may change again prior to finalisation of the annual report. And the second key change in there is there's a change to the requirements for disclosure and audit fees, where we're now required to provide further information, and including a split as to what those fees to the auditors are specifically for, where they're for non-audit requirements. So those are two key splits, and a draft of those accounting policies is shown in the report as well. If there's any questions on this.
I just, it seems mostly pretty technical changes. Is there anything that is substantive or that is really key for us to understand?
You're correct. It is mostly technical changes and different wordings. And by the time we work through with audit on these, they could well change again, particularly in that water space. There's nothing specific to accounting assumptions or anything that would change the basis on the numbers in the report.
Great, thank you.
So this paper is to bring to council the possibility of selling the shares that council owns in Seeka and in Zespri. So it's been identified through our looking to strengthen liquidity and management and review of all our expenses and costs that we should consider the sale of these shares. At the moment, there are about 208,000 on our balance sheet worth of an asset, 164 being Zespri and 42,000 being Seeka. So it's being proposed here that these shares are sold and that the funds are moved to the general rate reserve.
I note under option B, it refers to the advantage of retaining them being future dividend streams. It's worth noting that that only has a limited life, no more than 3 years from when we exit growing kiwi fruit. So wouldn't put too much emphasis on that if you're thinking about option B.
That was actually part of my question, because I know Councillor Thwaites also raised it the other day. Are we still producing kiwi fruit and are we still eligible for dividends? If it's a 3-year horizon on getting dividends if you're not growing kiwi fruit.
So for the Seeka shares, we're no longer entitled to dividends, but for the Zespri ones, we currently are. They would.
Until what time?
At the moment, we're still the owner of the land that has the kiwi fruit on it, so we're still in that category. If we were to sell that land, then we'd move to a share class B, which would mean at that point in time, we would no longer be entitled to dividends.
Have we actually still got any kiwi fruit growing on land? Or was that last parcel that got pulled out a month ago?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that update. It's something we can
No,
certainly
he
look
drives past it
into.
every day.
Right on the back, they're all gone. So, well, I'm happy to move 1, 2, 3, and 5 on the recommendation, and seconded by councillor Thwaites. Any debate? All those in favour? Against? Carried. Lizzie here? No, not Lizzie. So Rachel's going to take over for Lizzie. This was for information only, so this is great burning questions on any of these items. No, but no questions on that information paper. All straightforward technical stuff that has to be done. So, yes. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I will speak to it if that might be helpful, just to stimulate some discussion. This is the first time that we have presented this data report to you, and we will be bringing it to you for each successive Audit Risk and Finance Committee meeting in the new triennium. Largely, it just gives you a snapshot of the numbers that we're processing of official information requests, gives you a sense of the type of requests that that we are being asked about, where the burden for answering them lies, and you'll see that that's most notably within our regulatory services and our infrastructure groups. And similarly, we publish some information in there around privacy obligations too. We are obliged to notify the Ombudsman or Privacy Commissioner rather, of breaches of privacy obligations. You'll note that certainly over the last quarter, there have been some very minor privacy breaches. Typically, they are things like an email being sent to the wrong recipient. We do notify everything, and none of them have resulted in substantive investigations. And finally, there are no open complaints with the Ombudsman presently at the time of writing this report. Happy to answer any questions on the report, not in relation to substantive LGOIMA requests.
Councillor Joyce.
For this, it's useful and it's a good innovation. What I would ask is, has anybody, can we incorporate in this if we've charged? You may remember a year or so, or 2 years ago now, introduced a charge for LGOIMA requests that take a long time. It would be good to get an idea of how often we charge that, and for both this report and in future.
Yes, we can certainly do that. We have had the ability to charge for LGOIMA requests for a long, long time, because that is there's a statutory provision that enables us to charge. And what I can say is the general manager who looks after this area is that it would be at best one LGOIMA a year that we typically charge for on average, but we can provide that information in reports going forward.
Yes.
Just, is it unusual that we have so many email error or postal errors in terms of sending these to the wrong recipient?
No, I don't. I think as an organisation that has so much outward communication, it's not unusual that from time to time there are little anomalies where an email is received or mail is received by the wrong recipient. This is just giving you a level of transparency over it. And as I say, they are classified as minor by the Privacy Commissioner, so they don't subsequently result in an investigation, but we do report them.
So surely you just reply to an email, to the original email. So yeah, it just seems a bit strange that these creep in. But one other question, if I can, I don't think it's in the report, but do you have stats on how many from the same person requesting the LGOIMAs?
Yes, we do, but that's not something that we would put into a public agenda. That's private. That is actually private information. Who is making those requests?
No, I mean the number of requests from individuals without naming who the individuals were.
Well, I would probably question the usefulness of that statistic. Councillor Daly?
Can't do anything about it. Councillor Murray-Bench.
Could I please ask two questions, Councillor Joyce? I've got the McClure and Cobb issue. There's no cost to council in that, is there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, noting that that matter is a very sensitive one, it's not appropriate that it's discussed in this open agenda.
Right. Second point, Pongakawa and the leasing of the land that Kiwi Rail has done twice.
Coming on to that later on.
On the
so
wrong,
we'll leave
point of
that
order, I think on the wrong agenda
one.
item.
So Councillor Sol.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, it just probably interests me that close to 30% of the requests are either partially or fully declined. How does that relate? Do you have data from previous situations? Is it something out of the ordinary to have about a third of the requests declined, or is that subject to just straight out the subjects and how it falls?
So the bases upon which we might partially withhold or decline information are all prescribed in the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act. Most typically, the things that we decline are, for example, when someone asks for complaint information, who is complaining about me, we would never ever disclose the name of the complainant. So in that regard, we would say that we have partially withheld information, and people have the right to complain to the Ombudsman. But for the most part, all of our requesters get the nature of the information that they're seeking, notwithstanding that some might be partially withheld.
Mayor.
Oh, mine was about it's answered by Grant's question, so that's all fine.
Did you have another one?
Oh, just can you clarify what number of responses published means?
So some responses where we, and a good example would be number of known dogs registered. We get a lot of people requesting that information throughout the year. So in some instances, it's useful to publish that information openly on our website. Or if we've got a topic, a policy topic that has got some data attached to it and people are interested in it, then we might proactively publish that on our website.
Thank you, Rachel. All right, so that is the end of the open meeting. So we need a mover and a seconder to go into exclude the public. Thank you, Councillor Sol, Councillor Ray. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Right.